you subscribe to Pando? That's so hot.
All right, all right, all right. Oh, let me actually pull the comms up to maximum so you can actually hear the guest. Especially as because it's CCP Rise. I don't think I have to introduce them too much. One of my favorite devs, and I'm not, I think I'm speaking for most of the community. The recent changes usually on point. Sometimes, sometimes I have some stuff to complain to, but generally
Yeah, maybe
speaking,
used to be one of your favorite devs until the last few updates.
well, with Signal, you got some, you're in a race. You have to one-on-one at the sun to decide, I guess. But yeah, and also Isa made it back. The Boetian has returned. Finally, she could make one. So if you guys have really, really good questions in chat, then she might just bring them up. Other than that, my list is pretty long, so I can't guarantee it. Right, it has to be a good one. So like let's jump in like right away. Let's go. Like I think maybe it's best to go with the most recent changes, or maybe with the proposed changes for blobs.
Sure.
So first of all, like why would be my big question. Why do you or why did you guys decide like blobs need a buff or like a change in any way?
Oh, I mean, they've been. I feel like they along with Navy battleships and I don't know what other things there are, but they've been sitting a long time without like a proper pass. Like we've, you know, partially included them in some of the random battleship buffs, and they've gotten like incidental buffs from other things, but it's been a long time since they had like a dedicated pass. And good timing for it because wanted to do more stuff for hunters, given some of the things that have affected hunters recently. There's actually a few from a few different directions. The covert ops stuff had been popping up, so it was a good like thematic match for that. But we'd had Black Ops on the list to get since I don't know since last year or something. It was like part of the original sort of Talos list of stuff we wanted to hit, and so it was just a slot that worked for it. Yeah.
So like the stats and all that stuff, like it's all. I think I didn't see any complaints. I think that was pretty much on point. Like nobody.
Yeah, there isn't usually lots of complaints when you just like increase damage. That's one
Well,
thing I've noticed over the years is if you just increase damage, everyone pretty much is happy.
yeah, I mean they're
Unless
not.
I don't know, maybe if I increase like fighter damage or something, there'd be complaints. But for the most part, I think people are just excited when things do more damage.
Yeah, I guess you're
And
probably right. But
I mean,
but
that's even true with. I thought for sure there was like this bug in the implementation for disintegrators on trig ships, and when we fixed it, it increased their damage, and they were already super strong. And I thought for sure people would be upset about this, and they're like, no,
it's like,
give them
well,
just more damage is fine.
I
You can give
mean,
them even more if you want.
obviously I'm a lover of kickies, right? So
Hmm.
obviously people would say like, oh yeah, obviously you love kickies, so you want more damage and all that stuff. But at the same time, people always have to, oh, like they complain it's like too much for a Tech 1 destroyer, but you can't really compare those two, right? Like they have a price tag, it's pretty high. And that's the same goes for blobs. So I think for blobs you could double the damage and people would still be like, it might just be a
Yeah,
little fishy, but it's a
yeah,
pretty big risk to field one, right? And the same for
yeah.
kickies, they die so fast for the price tag that there's a trade-off.
For
But
sure.
there's other playstyles too, right? The solo playstyle, for example, like kickies would dominate. That's why you don't see them too much, I think, because nobody would
Yeah,
engage a
but
kickie anyway.
yeah, but yeah, the price thing's really important. That was a lot of the I think more and more like with both the Marauder Pass and the Black Ops Pass, just looking at what it actually costs to put one on the field, and then trying to get a range of stats that seem appropriate based on that. And when you compare, I mean, all that's been reworked, of course, now too, which affects our decisions. But when you especially compare to caps, like the price efficiency on caps, especially before the industry stuff, but even now compared to the price efficiency on Tech 2 battleships is pretty crazy. So there's felt like there's room to make them a lot better, especially when the survivability is so much worse. Like if you're willing to put 2.5 bill that can't siege and has pretty crappy resists and pretty low HP on grid, like you should get something cool for it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean the other big reason we wanted to do Black Ops is this conduit jump thing, which um,
I was about
has
to
been
ask.
like, yeah, it's funny we haven't like kind of told the whole story, but I really and everyone I talked to, both people, players using the stuff and internally, everyone pretty much agrees that the kind of base design for bridges is just I just don't like it at all. Like the idea that you would have an aspirational ship in a ship line, so like Black Ops being the sort of peak of kind of covert training and you know covert jumps and all that, and then what it actually is just a like a an infrastructure piece that's totally risk-free that just grants jump drives to bombers, I think is super weak. It reminds me a lot of the old command ship design. Like the pinnacle of faction warfare 1v1 is having an alt that grants extra stats to your 1v1 ship that sits in a POS and can't actually be killed. I think Bridges feels really similar to me. Like
it's very much like it's one of those things. The same for Sinos, right? That when you go back, it was ridiculous that we could fit Sinos on everything, right?
Yeah.
That people need to at first see, like, yeah, actually, that was kind of crazy. You could just like warp in a scepter who's bubble proof and just like light the Sino, right?
Yeah.
And
I think that's true for all bridging, like certainly for Titans too. Like, why is it that one of the most important things it does, you spend, you have the money and you get this big aspirational thing, and then it sits in tether and grants a jump drive to your subcap fleet? That's so weird. Like, it should be. I think it's weird for a couple. Like, I think it's unsatisfying, even though it's powerful. It's unsatisfying for the person who gets that ship because they don't get to like put it on a grid. They don't get to
tell me about
use it. Really, it's just an alt job. And then I think it's also unsatisfying and sort of out of balance for the things you get to do with it, because you're not risking anything extra. So you just get this big power, came with a lot of cost, but it doesn't introduce any extra risk. And with Black Ops, I think that's especially pronounced because drops are so powerful just with bombers and recons or whatever. Like bombers, especially because they're so cheap, you can put a ton of power on grid. There's not really any meaningful risk on the Black Ops side. So as a victim, it feels really hollow. It's like, I got ganked by jump drive bombers, but because they have some Black Ops somewhere that I'm never going to see and isn't actually part of this engagement. So the story, though, for this update that's funny that people don't know, and I'm curious actually what you think about it, is we intended to just swap the mechanic to just get rid of bridging and just have conduit jumps and not have bridging at all, because
not bridging at all on Black Ops, and not bridging at all. Like
weren't going to go up to Titans yet.
Right.
That would be a little
I
wacky.
like that you took the careful step there, to be honest.
I mean, we took the ultimate careful step because we wanted to just have just a conduit jump because it's like healthier, but it would have turned what should be a hunter buff into a hunter nerf, because you would have just had to put a Black Ops into system every time, no matter what situation it was. And when I talked to most Black Ops people I talked to thought that sort of made sense. Like the theory is good, but ultimately it means a whole bunch of added cost to do something that you could do for free already, or a bunch of added risk, and that would feel pretty shitty. So we decided to just give both options. What do you think about that?
So I would say, so first on Black Ops, I think if you would have gone this step further and said, okay, it's only conduit jumps, I think it wouldn't be that big of a deal, because a lot of times you bridge forward and then you kind of want to follow up as soon as possible, but you have to wait for the bridge. Then the covered Sino might go down. It's all a hassle. Then your alt dies, and you have to get the new covered Sino on a save and all that shit, right? But while even if it's a trap, if you jump right away, chances are you can just MGD out anyway, right? If that Black Ops pilot is paying attention. I think the safety aspect, it's not that crazy risky. Anyway, if he's fast, right? You got to be fast. If the cover sign is up for 10 seconds and then you jump, if it's a trap, you're dead. So I think it would be fine with the conduit jump only, to be honest.
Okay, that's good to hear. What we decided is, like, we didn't want to risk making it feel like a nerf. Like, we're going to the trouble to try and make this class more exciting, and if people are using it in a way that they would really be uncomfortable to have to put the Black Ops on grid, we don't want to make this feel like a nerf. So we'll try and make it worthwhile in some situations. As is, we'll make the fuel cost cheap. We'll let you jump a lot of stuff at a time and then see how it goes, and then have the plan to hopefully phase into just conduit jumps later, especially if we can find other ways to either replace the bridging functionality or lower the cost, like lower the risk level. Like, one thing that I think sounds cool is to have a conduit jump, like a module that does conduit jumps rather than bridging, like the current covert gen, and let that module be fit on something else. Like, let either introduce a battlecruiser Black Ops class that can fit it, or even like covert Tech 3 cruisers, let them fit it. So you can conduit jump, maybe not 30 people, maybe 10 or something, but you put something risky on the grid, something more expensive than bombers rather than bridging, but not as expensive as a blob. So you don't have to put 2.5 bill on grid to do it. Maybe you can put 500 mil or 800 mil or something instead.
Yeah, so I think the risk part isn't the big deal. I think what it would be a little annoying for is like if you bridge people in, you want to constantly keep bridging more people in, right? So you have the bridge set up.
You would need,
and you
need
want to
jump
bring in
ship
more
every
people.
time.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and then it would get a little bit,
Yeah.
But I think in general, it would be probably the healthier, the cooler version too.
That's the thing. I think it's cooler.
Yeah,
I think
it
it's cooler for
definitely
both
is. It
sides.
definitely is. And you know what I instantly wondered is like, do you guys have that in mind for supers? For example, like motherships, right? That's what everyone was like thinking.
Yeah. Why not?
You know, I mean, I could bring up the, what is it called? The recloner that nobody's using, sadly, right?
Yeah.
That was kind of trying to get into that direction, right?
Yep.
But
no, for sure. I think it's the same. It's the same set of issues at a larger scale with, and this kind of leads into a bunch of the other stuff you wanted to talk about in a way, because I think that we've run into a bunch. We're trying to get to a bunch of these, I don't know, more difficult design issues, like more fundamental design in Eve, if we can, with Talos. Like some of the stuff we're trying to change is in this area, and other teams. I mean, the economic stuff is kind of similar, where the design that seems healthier and like seems like what we do if we started from scratch now, is great, except it has potential negative impact given what exists now. So the transition to the better mechanic, and that's, like, we'd rather have conduit jumps for Titans, but also if that means that there's way less big fights because people aren't willing to put a Titan on grid, which means they can't get a subcap fleet there, and so nothing happens, that's not worth it. Like, we'd rather have the activity. And that, it's kind of the same trouble with the nullification and stab stuff, where it's like, we think we can get towards a healthier design that we would have ideally had from the beginning, but we have to be careful not to hurt activity. We have to make sure we don't just like frustrate everybody out from playing, because that wouldn't be worth it, even if the design is better.
And that sadly kind of reminds me like about the observatories, I gotta say, because that's kind of, in my opinion at least, it's kind of what happened. Is it was like a well-intended change, but then,
I mean, it's definitely better. Like, from, like, if you're just, okay, let's approach this without worrying about how things were, or like, uncounterable long-term cloaking you would never, I think now if you ever started from scratch, you would never have that. It doesn't make sense. Or you'd have some other way to, like, maybe this solution isn't what you'd go to, but that set of mechanics would not have been the case. And
so my frustrating part about this, that's the only frustrating part. You say long-term AFK cloaking or whatever, but long-term is not 15 minutes though, right? Like in Eve, that's not long-term at all. That's right now, right? So it's way, like, it's just so short that you have that time window. And I actually, interestingly, my trusty CSM representative Brisk, right? I kept him up to date on that last op. I like ran into this problem. Hostiles are forming. I want to set up a trap. I cloak the dicta. I need to cloak it well ahead of time. I can't cloak it when they undock, and they're gonna stay undocked for like 15 minutes. But there's observatories.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a good example, though. Like, should you be able to hide something? How long should you be able to hide something without defenders having any option to deal with it? Like, how long should you be able to have an invulnerable piece of power just sitting in a position frustrating defenders? What is the right amount of time for that? And I think the right answer is none, because they should have an option, and then you should have a way to answer. Like, it should be some back and forth where the more each of you invest, or the more whatever smarts you have, it's a push and pull, rather than just like, I have a dude here, you can't do anything about it for whatever amount of time. That just seems like such a strange requirement,
Well, the dude is not actively doing something to their fleet at that moment, right? So, like, I think.
Well, except
an
he's
hour-
representing very real threat to them.
Yeah, and
You're
they
not
gotta be
doing anything
careful.
except saying that if they undock, they die.
But as
right?
long as he's cloaked, they know he can't do anything to them. So if they warp exactly
But
to the
it
spot
must
where you
represent
predict-
real risk, though, or you wouldn't need it. Right? Like,
Yes.
obviously, there's something powerful about it. Otherwise, you wouldn't say you need it to do something.
But if your argument like that, then why can I log off on that spot and then log in and land on the same spot, right?
Log off's really hard to deal with.
Yeah, see, like it's the same issue, but now they know I'm in local, so you would
Yeah,
you
but
could say it's
when you're
safer
logged
for them,
in, you
right?
can see what they're doing. I mean, you
Well,
can see
then,
what's there,
yeah.
whereas you wouldn't. You would at least need a spy or something the other way to know
Yeah.
when to log in.
In this case, it was a dicta, right? So I can't just cloaky warp off, recloak, and stuff. So I would have would have to have a scout that does that, and then lock the dicta in at the right time to actually be effective, which is super hard, right? Try to pick the perfect timing when you throw that bubble to catch them warping to a certain spot, and all that stuff. It's hard enough without the changes. So
I don't deny at all that we have a lot of tough situations where getting something rolling, getting a fight started, or getting something exposed where like an escalation can happen takes a lot of work and a lot of tools, and it sucks if we move towards better designs that make it even harder for you to do that. But I don't know. I want our goal to be, make it possible for stuff to happen with better designs, which I think is possible. Like in these, one thing I've wondered about, and I think we need to do a lot of like analysis, look at what's actually happening. But people saying, for instance, that they need eyes everywhere to be able to spot opportunities for content. That feels real, like that I believe you. Yes, but is that partly because of the fact that since there's eyes everywhere, activity is super suppressed? Like people can't do anything because if they move, they get seen and punished. And it's like, you know what I mean? It snowballs. It's like, well, we can see 50 systems and we have to because there's so little happening, but there's so little happening because you can see 50 systems and they know it. So there's no reason for them to move. And the hope for me would be that we take away your ability to watch everything, but that leads to activity that means you don't need to be able to see it all. Do you know what I mean? And I have no idea if that's bearing out at all with these changes or what. I'm just like, I think that there's like this loop that we get caught in from a content creator perspective where, you need a tool that oppresses activity. So now you need more tools, which oppresses more activity. And pretty soon no one can do anything at all.
Yeah, so I get your point, but at the same time, it is kind of it's the opposite of it helps with the full Intel situation, right? If we had a little local delay of a couple seconds, I'm sure you've heard that 100 times from 100 different people, right?
Yep.
If there was a little local delay, so the hunter would have a chance to get to the target, and the target is still exposed, then I'd get that. I'd agree to that, what you just said. The less people. I
mean, I think that's another, like, I'd love to find a place to try something like that. I know a lot of people think it's really interesting, but I see that going sort of the same direction where if the delay makes it so that you can catch people who do whatever, warp to a anomaly, and they're consistently being caught because of that, they will stop going to those anomalies. And if that happened, you would have the delay that would allow you to get to stuff. There'd be less stuff happening because they know that they were under threat of you coming in without them seeing them. And then imagine if we tried to take away that delay. You'd be like, how are we going to catch him now? We couldn't even catch him with the delay. And it's the whole reason you couldn't catch him with the delay is because they couldn't do anything. You know what I mean? Does this make sense? I just think
I know what you mean. Yes. It's like a blackout light. That's what you're thinking, but
Yeah,
I think
it's similar. Blackout's great. Oh, we can catch people. Oh, everyone dies, so everyone stops ratting. So we have to take blackout away, which then makes people like, oh, it was so fun because I could catch a bunch of stuff. Like, no, actually, just no one could do anything because it was so easy to catch stuff.
yeah,
And I think
and I
we've seen
totally agree with
smaller
that.
versions of that in a bunch of places.
So, but when we talk about a delay, obviously there's a sweet spot there, right? Like, does it have to
I,
be? It doesn't have to be a minute. It doesn't have to be like craziness. But
I
like
mean,
to give the
to
hunter a
me,
chance.
hunters need chances, obviously, but I think to me what needs to happen is the content and like the activities people are doing need to create those chances relative to what they're up to. So if you want to run higher reward stuff, you're more likely to get caught because whatever the site tackles you, or some mechanic creates more opportunity for you to be caught based on the risk you're taking. Like, I think doing it through blanket mechanics across, like, all of null works this way. It's just gonna like have this sort of blanket oppression on activity, and instead it'd be healthier to scale that risk based on activity, which we're doing more of, like, for instance, with a deployable design. And we've been talking about this in other areas too, like high set ganking, or I don't know, other spots where we say, I mean, it's a really small version, but even with the observatories, you can push the AFK cloakers out, but you put something at risk that you can't defend. Like, this dies if you can't protect it when you look for this benefit. And we can do the same thing with rewards. You want to spawn a high reward thing, you got to put an asset at risk to do it, and that can be killed always. And it's not a matter of like, does local mechanics allow you to catch that thing? It's like, it's more related directly to the rewards you're getting. And I think that's where we want to look. Can we actually scale risk based off what you're doing, rather than have like everything in null can be caught because there's AFK cloakers in every system, and a delay on local, or nothing can be caught because local's instant and no one can ever get into a system without being seen. Like, those two options both suck.
Yeah, it's a tricky like a balance issue, right?
It is. It's
it
why this stuff has been left alone for like 10 years. As soon as we started working on nullification AFK cloaking and started getting feedback on it, you should see with AFK cloaking stuff, we had two massive proposals, totally different than what we ended up going with, where the CSM like went crazy, like flipped meeting room tables over and left meetings.
With the nullification or with the cloaky thing? What was it?
With the cloaky thing.
All right. So
like before we landed on this went pretty well, but we had other versions, totally different other versions before this.
Can you like give a super short version of them? Like
I don't remember. The first one was really grand, and it's something we might come back to, but we were trying to figure out a way to have areas in system where you could hide, like have
little clouds,
cloud field things that you could be in,
space weather,
that you couldn't see into, but you could see out of, so you could spot stuff to hunt, but they'd have to be cleared out manually. You'd have to bring ships in and look around for bad guys in there if you thought they were there to get your space safe, but you could never know for sure because you couldn't know if you checked every corner. Like, have these massive grids, 8,000 or whatever, massive space, that would like take lots of manual work. So the idea is you could like make your space more safe if you took the time to look, or you could like risk it, but you wouldn't know if there was hunters there, this kind of thing.
That doesn't sound
It's a nightmare. It's very hard to design.
I guess, yeah.
It's really easy to break. Like, oh, I come into system, I warp to your cloud, and then I log off. How long are you going to look for me? You're never going to find me. So that went down the tubes. And then we had another one where we were trying to, it was mine, I was trying to split cloaks up into different types of cloaks that hid from different types of intel. So you could like, I don't remember, one that hides you from local but doesn't hide you from probes or something, and then one that hides you from whatever, but I don't remember. But split them up so that you could never have like all of the intel hiding at the same time, and so you'd have to use multiple versions to get hunting done. Sounded cool, really easy to break, really problematic.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of times, I mean, also the cloud kind of, or the space weather version, like it's so complicated, it's almost destined to, break like 5 other
Yeah.
things, right? So,
Yeah, which it's not bad if it makes those other things like I think if it just like, oh, we have to figure it out again, everything's crazy but it's kind of fun. But when it I think especially if internally we have any inclination that it's just broken, like that it leads to super toxic stuff, it's a good sign that it's going to be really toxic. Like if we can even start to see that potential, I think that you guys will really, really make a mess. And so we just backed away.
sorry, guys.
Which is, I'm really happy with where we ended up. We have to see for sure what happens to all the different affected parties, including yourself, and adjust. I mean, we have to adjust. We're probably going to put in the next patch a booster that extends the hardened cloak duration, for example. And keep looking for tweaks to make sure that we have some balance of like there isn't toxic AFK cloaking everywhere, but there also isn't like no option for
By how
gameplay
much?
styles like yours.
By how much is it gonna expand?
I don't know. I
everything?
haven't even started on it. How much do you think you need?
I think I need an hour for good traps.
Yeah.
You gotta be an hour early. Like, it's just how it is.
Okay. How much would you pay for an hour in ISK?
Well, usually it's just a cheap like alt, right? So I would say like 10 mil is fine, right? 10, 15 mil. If you want to extend it, you wouldn't use that all the time, but you can throw it in a saber or something. It's like, you're not going to lose your mind about it. I think that makes sense. But yeah, I think
I really like we were when we put it in, I know you and other people were saying there should be variations on timing based on the cloak, which we could easily do, but
that's what Sotonia instantly said, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just I feel really nervous about anything that permanently changes duration. I really like the idea of temporary duration changes from one angle or another. Like it'd be fine to do it on the cloaks, but I think then that just becomes the standard. There's no point really in having the lower one unless it's only on like only on prototype cloaks or something like that. But I feel like the booster is a really good direction for that, so we'll probably just try that, see how it goes.
Overall, with the cloaky thing, like I said earlier, that the 15-minute thing on the cloak invulnerability, that's the big pain point in my eyes.
Yep.
And I always so I instantly wondered, like, if it's aimed for cloaky campers, right? And that's the main target, right? Yeah, there's maybe some other, I don't know what other gameplay is actually there other than that you want to hit, really.
I mean, that is this is definitely the case that best shows why there needs to be an answer. But I also think, like around the capital travel discussion, for instance, I think it's really like, I don't know the right answer, but it feels wrong that you should be able to just push a button to have a capital be invulnerable forever without anybody being able to do anything about it while it's logged in. Like that just doesn't make any sense. It should not. It's like it's a very powerful uncounterable thing. So there should be some answer, but I don't know exactly how long you should be able to be cloaked, or if there's what exactly the counter should be, like how much effort it should take, or what kind of activity would be best suited.
Yeah, but so what I was coming for, or like going at, was like, if you would have taken a more careful approach, maybe like that duration should have started rather long than the short, right? I think you went for the hardcore version right away. Other than the Black Ops jump, where you went the careful way, and in this case you went like a little like for the tough version right away, and that's like where I was thinking. I think if you made it an hour at first, right, it would have had the same effect on cloaky campers, like on those hardcore.
I mean,
campers.
that's an inch. I wonder about that. We talked about definitely different durations, and
did you talk?
A lot of the reason we ended up here is that if you're active in covert ships, you can recloak so easily that it's really not a disincentive if you're at your keyboard. Acceptance, obviously, there are situations, but for the most part, it's not a big deal, and it sounds really frustrating for if you're saying it's more than an hour, especially if it's more like 2 or 3 hours, that's a whole session for a lot of people who are wanting an answer to AFK cloaking. And so it starts to not even be relevant for them. I could see an hour, that definitely would have been a more conservative, probably would have still had a pretty big effect on AFK cloaking, but would have been less.
I think someone.
So many of.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just trying to throw in. I would think someone who only plays an hour. I'm not suggesting 2 or 3 hours. I think that's a little too far. But an hour. I think someone who only plays an hour wouldn't use an observatory anyway, right? Because it takes. First of all, he logs in. He knows he got an hour, right? Then he puts it up. That's going to be 10 minutes. Then the thing he cycles and has a chance, right? So let's say on the second cycle he gets them, but that's 20.
Then you have to follow up.
What if the guy is active though and he pays attention? He just logs off, and now you wasted 40 mil, and then you have 40 minutes left to get that ISK back, and you might just do that, right? You get like a good tick or two, but in general,
isn't
like
a strong argument for going to 15 minutes? Isn't that what you're just making the argument for? Because
no.
Now he can deal with it in time for it to be relevant for his session.
Well, so if the session was longer than an hour, for sure. But if it's longer than an hour anyway, then I don't think it matters too much, because the dude who is in system is already there. He's already cloaked. So it doesn't matter to that guy because he's already cloaked for an hour. You wouldn't put that up for someone who just entered system. You wouldn't assume that he's now inactive. Because you would wait and say, like, okay, like, let me see, is that dude a cloak again? But okay, 50 minutes in, I'm going to put that thing up and try to catch him, right? So it's like already over an hour anyway.
Yeah. I mean, yes, totally makes sense. I think we have in general, or maybe I should say I think overall in Talos, we have tried to, when we think that the direction is good, try to move hard in the direction so we get a good read on the effect, and then tweak towards an average rather than. And I think that if we had done these changes in the other order, I think the Black Ops change, we would not have taken that careful route. We would have done a complete conduit swap, but we did two highly controversial sets of changes where we went pretty hard, and so it felt like time to be a little more careful. But I think that's just generally our mode is to go pretty hard. I mean, as an example for this, despite going this hard, it's really hard in the metrics. They're easy for me to check to read what the impact was. There's not super noticeable differences in number of kills and routing numbers and any of that stuff. So it's tough, even when we go super hard, to see. Like, I understand your experience is a lot different, but for us to read out of like the macro, an effect is tough, which is why we tend to go harder so that there's more chance of us seeing what's actually happened.
Yeah, that's what I always say. Like, when content is being lost, especially when so that's the whole talk I gave Brisk. I like when those changes were announced, I grabbed Brisk and I was like, dude, all right, listen, right? And then he told me the CSM was super involved and there was a lot of work and all that stuff. So he said, like, right away, like, chances that they get it, like, that it change it before it's released very tiny, right? Like, still, like, so I explained that, like, in all the big groups, usually the part of content creation and, like, getting fun for the guys, it usually is based on, like, a handful of people only. And those handful of people are around, like, sending scouts everywhere and doing all that stuff, right? And when, for example, shout out to Schwo, and I do that every second, like, he's a good hunter. He's a really, like, active guy looking for all kinds of stuff. He's active all the time, but not every character of his is active every 15 minutes, right? But he's looking around, he's trying to find stuff, he's finding connections and all that stuff. But the second, like, it's already hard, and then the second you put more work on people like that, the chances, that might just be a little bit too much.
Hear that? There's a push and pull when you talk to this side. This is the case, and then if you talk to the hunted side, it's why is one super active guy able to oppress activity across a whole region like that? That's wild. It should not be possible for him to keep us all from undocking across like 10 systems or 20 systems just because one guy is active. Maybe we need tools to punish him for doing that.
Yeah, but the problem I was trying to explain is the content is lost because of this. Like, it might just be this change or like whatever change it is. If someone quits who is like essential to create content for a bunch of people, it's very hard to see that in the statistics for you guys, right? It will take a long time to see, like, and then who knows what the reason for that is, right? So
why should it? If he's generating fights that aren't happening and then he stops playing, we should stop seeing those fights, right?
Yeah, I mean, sure, but are you going to be able to put it down and say, like, okay, it was this change or like this combination or this is the reason why people like this quit? Do you even know it's because certain people quit, right? That's like
attributing any trend metrics to any one change is super, super hard, of course, unless it's really dramatic, like blackout or something like that. But yes, it's difficult. But that's why we just have a combo of feedback. We say, like, if we were seeing now a massive drop in null kills or fights in null or something like that, which is hard to see anyway because it is affected more by the war or more by player activity overall than any of these specific changes. But if we were, we would just have to combine. We'd say, oh, there's something weird going on, and then we start asking people why it is, and then everybody'd say, oh, it's because all the hunters left because you made some stupid changes, and then we'd say, okay, we need to change some stuff back. But it's true. It is tough. It's tough to tie, any big trend to a specific thing, and usually it's probably not a specific thing. It's a combination of things, but
Okay.
I need to open my window. You go.
Okay. So you mentioned, I was just kind of letting you guys talk, but you mentioned, one player being able to control, an entire region with the way that they're hunting. But at the same time, I feel like one of the major factors of Eve is like what Pando said when he said, there's only a handful of people that are creating content. If you look at an alliance, like in it, for example, there's maybe like, what would you say, like 8 active FCs that are driving content for the rest of the entire alliance. So when you take, I killed the bug. When you take, those 8 people that are able to drive that content for the entire alliance, and you make it harder for them to drive that content for the entire alliance, it's already hard enough to get people that are willing to put in that time to do it in the first place because of the amount of time that it takes for them to like plan, for the amount of time it takes Shvo to like figure all of this out. Do we really want to punish him for having that opportunity to then create that potential fight?
I'm definitely not saying we just want to like make it harder for him, period. Always the hope is that the net result is more stuff happening. That's definitely always the result. And I think that sometimes that gets experienced, especially initially when there's big changes, as like, this got harder for me. Anytime we change something, it gets harder for you because you have to figure out something else new. But always the hope would be, okay, it was harder for you. Maybe it doesn't work the same as it used to, but the net result is that there's more stuff happening. There's more opportunity. And I think one of the big bets around this stuff, the intel stuff, is as a hunter, you don't have the same kind of influence or the same kind of reach as before, but that leads to better activity among prey, which means ultimately there's more activity. We could be wrong, but I would never say that we're setting out to like make it harder for your content creators, period, because we just want people to sit in belts and farm peacefully, and that's how we hope the game ends. Like, that is not at all what we're aiming at. Where there's an ecosystem that's dynamic where we want to make it more robust, have more activity in each part of it, which leads to more potential for stuff to happen that everybody likes. And sometimes I think the changes we make have really obvious, quick connection to that, like filaments, for instance, where just suddenly there's more people in space, but it's the kind of gangs and the kind of activity that just is obviously feels like more action for everybody. And there's others where it's like, okay, we have to take away this important but busted tool of AFK cloaking and hope that that can lead to healthier behavior, more active, farming and prey behavior where there's still hunter tools that leads to more stuff happening instead of just this squashed, nothing going on ecosystem where you have to see 50 systems because there's only one dude in 50 of them that's doing anything. And I'm not saying this was, perfect right changes. I'm just saying we're not trying to kill hunting activity or make your FCs miserable or whatever. We're hoping to get towards more stuff happening.
I don't want to go I don't want to change the topic from the observatories to something else, because we also talk about this every single episode. But at the same time, if we want that prey behavior, we have to make the prey behavior worth it.
Totally.
So
yes,
100%. with the scarcity that's going on right now and everything, there's absolutely no reason for me to undock in a 350 million ISK ship when it's going to take me so long just to recoup the losses from me potentially losing that ship. So there's no reason for me to go out and rat right now.
Absolutely. That's a big issue. I'm much less connected to that work, so it's harder to speak to directly because that's all kind of economy side, which another team is working on. But we have talked about how this is totally a part of the most important part of the puzzle is it needs to be worth it for people to put stuff at risk. Some of that contextual risk I was talking about with sites is super tied to that. We've been talking for feels like 2 years now about developing content specifically for caps and super caps so that they're out in space, so that it's
I like that.
Worth it for them to put stuff out in the system so that then hunters have something to chase. We need to do that, but we're short on content dev right now for actually making stuff like new sites, and there's a backlog of stuff in that area that needs to be done, and then I can't even I don't know exactly what the short-term plan is for the more broad scarcity and redistribution stuff, but of course this is a huge part of it. If it's not worth it to undock, it doesn't matter.
Right. And I just feel I think that's a much bigger issue at hand as to why people aren't feeling safe in space versus cloaky campers. Yes, cloaky campers are an issue, but are they the issue right now? I wouldn't say so.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
I'm not going to talk about Citadels, by the way. I'm not going to go there.
Yeah, I think that's yes, the most for anyone. Before we talk about how people get caught when they're doing stuff, they have to be wanting to do stuff to begin with, and if it's not worth it, that's broken at the bottom. So for sure. And I have vague impressions about plans more on that end, more on economic and redistribution stuff, but it's not it's not my team, so it's harder for me to say as much detail about it.
So with the CSM stuff and so on coming up, I think Monday stuff is going to be announced, and in this discussion, especially with the changes, when what you said, certain changes, and then it's hard to predict on every playstyle and all that stuff, right? So how important is it to have a diverse CSM? So when you propose changes, that you have a group of people with different point of views to have a good idea, what's gonna happen to for example, what's his name? Not Marshy. Marshy's a cloaky camper who's also not active. Actually, the big cloaky campers are not even active anymore, right? So Marshy and what's his name again? On Mecca. So he was on the CSM. It would have been interesting to have him in the room when you proposed that, right? Because he would have been very woke.
It's always interesting to have him in the room.
I guess.
Could have proposed getting tacos, and it'd be interesting to have him in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, of course, having a diversity of playstyles represented on the CSM is great. I think the more like direct diversity we could get, the better. But over time, the CSM has also just become, I don't know, it's tricky to figure out what the exact perfect way for the CSM to be is, but something I've really appreciated over time is that the CSM as an institution has gotten more and more like mature and effective. And it, to me, like for instance, right now, if I need information about Black Ops, I say that to the CSM, even though they're all like null leaders. And I mean, not literally, there's some diversity, but even though they're all
goons.
they're all goons and they're all whatever. No, but they, you know, they go talk to those people for me, and they give me direct stuff. I get everything from just like consolidated impressions from them. Like for instance, if I ask Brisk, hey, I need info on Black Ops stuff or Covert Ops stuff, then he goes and talks to you and talks to other people and then brings me back what he hears. And I think the CSM's gotten better at overall. I get a ton of that kind of work from Gobbins, from Merck, and that's on everything. Like for instance, none of them, like for like Pochben, of course, has been a hot topic lately. None of them are super directly involved. Gobbins maybe some, but they go and talk to people who are. They talk to current CSM candidates. They talk to people who are in those corporations. They always have the connections to do that more easily than me. And then they just bring me information. And I think they've gotten better and better at doing that over the last couple years. And so I rely on them pretty heavily for a lot of that. And of course, whatever, they can be selective about what they send me, and it's always a little political and takes some navigating. But I was, you know, working when the CSM was more diverse in a direct sense. And I felt like it was less effective then than it is now because it was so much less professional. So it would deteriorate. It still does often deteriorate into crazy internet screeching. And in those days, it was like hardly worth listening to. I mean, they just fought, you know, like while we watched. And sometimes that was helpful. but I think they understand now that like the best thing they can do is be a conduit to the player base, regardless of what we want to know, and they're good at that, as evil null goons.
But when the CSM was more diverse, that wasn't the reason for the, you know, for the stuff. I think like in general, I think the population of EVE has grown up a little bit and matured.
For sure.
I mean, obviously we're all getting older, right? But
yeah, and I could totally imagine a both directly diverse playstyle and mature CSM, which would be great. That would be super cool, and it could happen. But
so is there?
I think there's the drawback, you know, with the way it is now is that they can be so professional and effective that they will like all agree about something so that it comes with like a really strong unified voice and seems like it's the only side, which of course it's not, and we're aware of that. But it, you know, they're smarties, and sometimes the lobbying can get pretty
and stuff.
I mean, not making deal. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what they do.
That's what they do all day, right? It's like, it is just what they do. And I'm not even like, in a lot of cases, it might just do good, you know? In a lot of cases, it might just be a good thing. But sometimes it might just, you know, be bad. And I'm glad you guys are, you know, aware of it.
I mean, of course. Yeah. I think Olmeco is a really interesting case because, you know, he came in feeling like the people's voice who was gonna bring truth versus the evil, you know.
And then he found out everyone's kind of level-headed, actually.
Yeah, and then the end result is, I think, that we got more thoughtful, but still kind of cooperative feedback from both. Like, Olmeca wasn't saying the same thing that the rest of the CSM was by the end, but it wasn't just this like angry fighting. It was like, yeah, that thing they're saying is true, but I would prefer this answer instead. And we have some of that with Phantomite now for sure. He's usually on the other end, but, you know, in a lot of cases ends up moving towards a middle, which the big block guys do too in those cases.
Yeah, Phantomite, you know, he's an interesting candidate. Obviously, I supported him last year, also together with Init, we put him on the ballot and tried to push him. And he seemed like a little bit aggressive. So like it can be good at times.
God, dude. He told me, I don't remember which change it was recently, but he told me that he said you literally stabbed me in the heart. It's like one of the most performative CSMs I've worked with. He's it's never a dull moment. It's also I don't know, he's funny. He's one of the ones where it's been the hardest to predict what his opinion will be when I have changes. I feel like
which is nice
flip a coin and I get Jekyll and Hyde. Like I don't know why.
But which is nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, so you always get a different take.
Yeah.
And it's nice that like he's not too afraid to offend someone. So if he actually agrees, then
he's not afraid to offend people.
You're going in the right direction, I guess.
Yeah. No, it's been good. We got a lot of really good. I also think it can be really awesome to have a person like that around because they'll trigger the shit out of the more mainline people, which will lead to like more thoughtful feedback. Like I think on some of the AFK cloaking stuff, there was like the initial feedback from the Merkelchens and the Villies is like it should obviously be like this without much explanation or depth. And then Phantomite says, "You're an idiot. I hate you. You stabbed me in the face. Everything's terrible." And then they have to actually like articulate more about what's going on, and then they end up through that fight getting to a more middle ground. But the real winner is us because we get like a lot of understanding through the course. So of that
you want those fights? Is that what you're saying?
Definitely.
You need a more immature
as long as they
CSM.
don't get so toxic that like no one's participating, which can happen. It just gets to like I'm quitting the CSM or I hate your mom or whatever, and we're not even talking about EVE Online anymore, and that's not so useful. But it's not usually like that. And yeah, the EVE Online fights are very helpful. Very glad to have those.
No, that's actually good to hear. I'm hoping still to get a couple non-null block guys on there, but I think this year it's gonna be all null block. Maybe Sutonia and iBeast can make it. So
does iBeast have a chance? I was wondering about that.
I think so. I think a lot of people, even if they don't speak Russian, respect his skills and they put him somewhere on their ballots, right? And I still think people don't understand how the ballots work. And I made a Reddit post. And I'm kind of mad at myself to not explain it a little bit better. I think I should have taken more time with it, but I think most people are not aware how it works, right? Like how they should actually vote so they get like a decent like mix of people on there. But I think a lot of people will put iBeast like second or third, right? First is their guy, and then second or third is then iBeast or like a Sutonia, whoever they like more. So I think those two actually definitely have a good chance there.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Sutonia is so solid, and I still talk to him. We get them on NDA forever after they're on CSM, so I still talk to him about balance stuff a lot, even though he's not officially CSM.
So you can still consult him about stuff that's coming up because he's still under NDA? So you only have to be on CSM once?
I think NDA is 5 years from the last time you got confidential information. So as long as I keep telling him stuff that's coming, his NDA refreshes forever.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Pando's really thinking about it now. He's like, man, I only have to be on the CSM for 1 year, and then I get to talk about stuff.
I mean, so the main reason why I never ran, obviously it's a lot of, like, it's a commitment, right? If you want to do it proper, you have to commit to it.
It's a huge commitment.
And there's a lot of work involved and meetings and all that stuff. So, like, you got to be aware of that.
Yeah.
But then also, I want to talk about stuff with everyone and not get banned for it, So,
it's treacherous.
Yeah, what if I talk to someone on this and then we talked about something and I just bring it up thinking, oh yeah, that's just like common knowledge. And I forget, that was under NDA. And then I'm, sitting here, shit, what am I going to do? I didn't want that.
And I think it's probably really, I don't envy the player position because there's so much going on. Like we could be talking about some potential change for a year internally with the CSM, and maybe we've said something about it at an eVegas or at whatever, but who knows? And so then it's hard for you to remember whether or not, I mean, that happens to me and I just feel grateful because I'm not going to get banned. so I can let stuff slip. But if I was a player, I think it'd be pretty tricky to manage that.
How about this? just tell everyone everything. Just be completely open with everything to everyone. Every CSM meeting, everything is open. Everyone can see it, and you don't have
Because
to worry
then
ever again.
everyone wants to pitchfork and burn the world down every single time
They
any
want
type
that
of
anyway.
change is.
They're
I know,
not gonna
but
change
think of,
anything.
but that's without the NDA stuff. So then you throw in the NDA stuff, and then everybody's completely freaking the fuck out
Whatever.
about everything constantly.
Nah, they do that anyway. Like, I don't think it would
I mean,
change
there's so
anything.
many reasons. You guys think we're really stupid already. Imagine if you could see the stuff we throw out. You would think we're like actually brain dead. And then also, like Miranda saying, or Issa saying, you know, you would. I think there's so much change anxiety already, and if you were hearing like, oh, maybe cloaks are not going to exist anymore in 2 weeks, and then we change our mind, you would go through all this like total emotional freak out, and then have this letdown if nothing happened. I think it would totally change. You know, we wouldn't be able to work the same way. We'd have to work slowly and carefully. It'd be like RuneScape, actually. You know what RuneScape does? They have like high level. I don't know how high level, but I know that they basically propose areas to work on to the community. The community votes before they start working on it, and then they follow development all the way through. And I think we'd have to do that. We'd have to say, okay, guys, are you all right with us working on it? AFK cloaking? And then you'd all fight each other and be really mad, and there'd be some vote that was like null bias or block bias because Villy, whatever. And then a bunch of people would be mad, and then we'd start working on it. We'd have to tell you really slowly, you know.
I think I don't agree.
Never going to happen.
I don't think I agree. I think you gotta be just like strong and, you know, stand your ground and just have the CSM discussions like open to everyone and all that stuff. So there's never the question of like, if did Brisk leak this and this info or whatever, right? Like that would never come up because like everyone can just see it like a couple days later anyway. Or like right away. Maybe people can just be like,
and I can tell you, this is such a rabbit hole. We struggle. Just since I've been working on this team and we've been doing these rapid releases, we have bounced all over the place in terms of how much we want to communicate. We started out being like, we're not going to say anything. We're just going to drop patches on patch day. No time for people to like try to solve it before it's out. Just let them go nuts. And then we've swung kind of recently almost back to doing like full dev blogs, trying to get stuff onto CC 2 weeks ahead of time so that people have time to like. And I still don't know what's best. It's so tough.
I think it depends on the change, really, right?
Yeah,
like,
but
you gotta
often
be very
we don't know which ones are going to need which thing. I mean, we knew these topics this last couple months were very sensitive, but did not expect, for instance, that this nullification change would be like such a drama bomb. Yeah, like I knew some, but like knowing what I know now, we would have like gone way softer into it. We would have had like early explanation stuff and then forum posts on CC to like talk about it, blah blah blah. And we kind of thought it'd be normal, like, oh, change. But no, it was like
like I gotta say, I didn't understand it either. I didn't understand why you changed the nullification at all, and why it was getting more complicated. I mean, when you look at T3s, they don't really profit from it at all. That used to be like one of their unique features that can be bubble-proof, and now you have to have the mod on, and like the subsystem, like it's kind of useless now. You would just use it, like, you know, it's kind of weird now.
It is kind of weird. It ended up. I feel like we need to go back to it for sure. It's a weird topic. The result for me towards the end of it, and this isn't exactly where the changes landed because whatever, but it's just anything where we have these binary immunities is really problematic. I think the one driving thing that stayed consistent through all the development for the stab and nullification changes is that we want powerful things to be activated and timed and not always on. Like, we want some strategy around using them if they're super powerful, rather than just being this like innate passive effect. There's a million ways then you can go from there into the implementation, and that's what we kind of went all over the place on. I don't feel terrible about where it ended up, but the main like the other overriding goal that I think we sort of discovered partway through is that any blanket binary immunity. Like I think the D-scan immunity on recons is kind of similar, but especially on-grid mechanical immunities, which we don't have a ton of, but nullification is a big one, I think are just not super fun for either side, and we'd be better off looking for more dynamic answers. Like,
So
I think MJDs are really cool as a nullification. It's a way to get around the effects of bubbles that isn't just saying bubbles don't exist. It's doing something that has its own strategy and trade-offs and counters. So you MJD out of a bubble, people can predict that and tackle you where you land and scram you, whatever. There's a set of options that's makes it more of a soft counter, and I think that's just a more fun direction for everybody. So long run, I think that's where we would want to go. But yeah,
you know what I would have preferred is remove all nullification over that.
Yeah, but did you see? I mean, you're. It's funny. You're the other side on this. There was we were going to do that. By the way, that was one potential option.
And then people come like with the interceptor role, right?
Yeah, hunting isn't possible without nullification. I have to be able to burn through 4 systems of bubbles, or I'm never going to catch a ratter. It's back to the whole conversation we had before about AFK
But
cloaking.
it's so rare anyway that you see that happen.
Yeah, that was my impression. But that's my experience. But it was the same exact. I could have sworn it was the same post saying, well, we have these guys and they have to tackle the Gilas, and they're not going to be able to do it if you take away nullification. And so
I like when you first introduced the nullification on scepters, I was like, oh no, because I mean, first of all, scepters kind of like fuck with our doctrine at the time, which was snatch. We were like a lot of MJDs, and you get around, and then you cover yourself with bubbles and all that stuff, right? So it's like, now there's like always that warp in ready. Like they can always get in position because they're bubble proof, and they can get around it. Or like it wasn't even that doctrine. Actually, like cloaky stuff, for example, right? Sneaky stuff. You throw a bubble, drag someone, but there's a scepter there. They can always warp to this guy at range, then burn around, get a warp in, and everyone else can warp in. Instead of they have to warp to this guy, well, there's a bubble up. You want to land in a bubble edge? We're in bombers, right? Go ahead and do it, right? So like that stuff that I instantly was like, like that counters so many things I liked to do at the time. And I know it's selfish, but I can only approach it from my point of view, obviously, right? And then with the fuzzy claw, but you call it probably something else.
Claws, just claws.
Yeah, the bubble-proof claws.
Claws from He Who Shall Not Be Named.
I like fuzzy, but that name is just too good to not use, right? The fuzzy claws. But like obviously that became an issue at some point, right? That was just too strong, I think. And
yeah, I mean, it's part of the implementation ends up what we did ends up looking kind of messy to players for sure. But another big driver is if we put it in a module, we have way more options for penalizing and dealing with stuff like that. Like if we want that to not be a thing, we have a whole bunch of stats we can affect. We can change weapon range. We can whatever without it needing to be on the base ship. We can just do it on the nullifier itself, which is really simple for us.
Yes. So, but now, like one interesting issue came up on the last podcast about wormholes and stuff, right? Frick holes is a controversial topic too, because obviously for wormholes, and that's where I think that's where it's the prime example for why you want a playstyle diverse CSM. Like one wormhole in the room, they can just say like, okay, this is going to have this and this impact, and it's going to be pretty crazy, right? Because all the guys there, they have a hard time, like they can't just predict it so easily. But so frick holes have that unique ability. They can't be rolled at the moment, or like they'll never be rolled again, I'm guessing. And it has a very big impact on evictions, because defenders can always, or attackers, right? They can always bring an endless amount of people in with just scepters. So now if nullification wasn't a thing though, that would change, right? Killing a bunch of scepters, if you're the attacking force and the defender wants to bring scepters, now you have a chance of actually killing them, right? So it has impact on that playstyle too.
I think again, well, I don't know. I think that we would be very interested in not having nullification, or at least not having any like simple passive nullification, maybe having none at all. But the feedback definitely that, and I you know, it's harder to see in metrics, but we're trying, is that there's a lot of activity that only happens because of nullification. And that's the thing. It's like it, even if it's better, I mean, it's just that these are all the same discussion. Like, people feel now that they need nullification to move around, which is helpful because it gets them to a ship for them to join a fleet, or it gets them to nullsec to do an activity that they wanted to do. Yeah, but shuttles would work in wormholes, wouldn't they? The Frigg holes?
Shuttles would work to get through there, yes, but shuttles are so easy
it doesn't
to blow
fix
up. No, shuttles are so easy to blow up. You would just need like a couple of medium smart bombs, right? And wormholes are crafty enough to, and I have like something with like smart bombs on the other side. But scepters, they're just tanky enough. If they come on a wrong angle, you're not gonna be ready for all of that, right?
Okay.
So I'm guessing shuttles wouldn't be that big of a deal.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. But that's at least a huge amount of the response at every level of feedback we got was that nullification is a requirement, in the same way that cloaking duration is a requirement, in the, you know, same way that bridging is a requirement to allow for some activity that is good in theory. And in all those cases, our hope is like the further we can move away from those mechanics, the healthier the ecosystem will be, the more stuff will actually go on. But we have to do some kind of balance. We have to, you know, find some middle ground so that we don't make a bunch of people feel like they can't do anything the way that they're used to doing it. And whether or not we were landed in the right place on any of them,
oh well, I mean, like, we're discussing things. Like, I don't want to say it was all bad, right? Like, when it comes to the blob stuff, I'm pretty hyped for that, actually. I really like that idea. Same for the observatories. I don't think they're like a bad idea. I just think that 15-minute timer, you know, whatever.
We'll tune it. We'll tune it. All right. Yeah. Get you your hour.
Nice. That was a promise, right?
Hand over CSM.
Yeah. See, guys, that's how you do it. That's how you get it done.
I can't wait to see once that change happens who takes credit for it. CSM has been really big lately on taking credit for everything. Brisk and Phantomite especially. I expect a Reddit post from Brisk saying, I got the cloak duration extended to an hour because I told Pando because he talks to Rise. That was me. Elect me again.
Well, he does that, and it's 50-50 meme, right? But he knows also a lot of people take him super serious. I say 50-50. Like the red dots, like he's running with that thing.
Gets caught.
Yeah.
When you don't like a change and you go to any CSM, it's not Brisk. It could be Phantomite, it can be Villy.
They didn't even tell us about this.
Yeah, like, oh yeah, I'll talk to these guys. Like, wait, like
I told them how horrible this was going to be, but they just completely ignored me.
Yeah.
It's funny. It is funny how often I put pages of stuff in front of them and say, like, can you guys look at this and tell me if it's crazy? And then the day that it goes live and they start hearing from people who actually read it, suddenly the channels all light up. They got a whole bunch of stuff to say.
That's why you need a more diverse
they're busy guys.
That's why you need a more diverse CSM. Because then there's that one guy that can predict stuff a little bit more.
I think diverse is good, but I think from the I don't know. From my perspective, we get good diverse input because they can use connections to the community that they have because they're usually leadership people. I'm not saying it would be bad to have diversity. I'm just saying I think that the idea that like all we get is no block agenda is misguided. I think they do a pretty good job.
That's good to hear.
Advocating for other parts of the game, or at least getting information on other parts of the game.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
So one thing that they talk about too is that they're like, well, CCP just brings, topics to the CSM and then whether or not the CSM have time to actually go back, gather that information from their counterparts regarding the topic, and then bring it back to CCP. Because like what I hear is like, CCP puts it on the table and then they have to deliberate right then and there on whether or not it's good for the game, give it back. So they don't actually have that time to then run it back through their channels.
That's probably totally true in some cases. I think that it's a big mix. I think there's stuff, that we've been talking about off and on. Like we, for instance, talked about new like strategic deployable stuff as like a thing to fight over around Citadel fights. We talked about things like passive income and old moons, that kind of thing. Like there's topics that have been rolling for like they're kind of continuously discussed, and there's lots of time to like build up reports and gather information and whatever. And then there's stuff like this Black Ops update where they probably get like 3 days to tell me what they can figure out before we're at least starting to put stuff on CC. And it just depends a lot on which feature, I think. So they might be telling the truth if they say that, on certain things that they just heard about it really late. But I think there's some luck in that too. Like, there's only so much time we can actually meet with them. They have a weekly meeting on Fridays, I think, where they meet with like one team or like one group, which maybe they'll meet the economy team this week, they'll meet our team next week, they'll meet an NPE team the week after that. And we end up talking about a ton of stuff in those meetings that might not be like the very next thing that's happening. But if it just so happens that there's a gap, if I don't talk to them for a month in one of those meetings and we have a big set of changes, it might kind of blindside them. Mm-hmm. And that's just because there's too much going on. It's tough to get everything in front of them with like the same lead time. But
right.
It varies. We try to, on our team at least, we really lean on them a lot and try to get stuff in front of them with enough time, but we move really fast, and once in a while something comes quick enough that they probably don't get enough time to go talk to people as much as they could.
One thing I have on my list actually at the very, very bottom is the heavy bomber thing. You remember? You guys talked about that, and it has been an idea for a long time. And so did it even get to the CSM to get ideas for it and all that stuff? Or
yeah, we talked about it quite a bit. I think there's a few like CSM discussion pages. We went through it. It's actually coming up again a little bit lately, not exactly in the same form, but yeah, it's still hanging around.
All right.
There's a whole bunch of stuff hanging around. We've been talking a little more about new ships lately, and yeah, we'll see. A few ideas, but
new ships. You guys heard it here first. Angel Titan's coming, right? I bet you get. I bet you get to hear that one like every time. But I don't know if we need more caps. Right? Do we really need those? I don't think so. Nobody's gonna build them anyway.
Really don't want to make ships that only like 5 people use, if possible.
Yeah,
I think we've both because Edencom stuff ended up not being great still, and because it was like hard to get and aimed at fleets, it was kind of a niche thing. Trig stuff before that was awesome, but expensive, takes a lot of skills, kind of a high-end ship. Like there hasn't been, we've reworked a lot of stuff, but I think like when we did Tech 3 Destroyers, for instance, is really fun because it's pretty accessible price-wise and skill-wise. So a lot of people could try something new, and I think that would be cool.
Yeah. Same for Command Destroyers and stuff.
Yeah, that's what it. Oh yeah, true. Those had a little bit. Those are fleet-oriented, but yeah, at least they're affordable, and I think it'd be cool to try and get back to that a little bit. Like do some maybe Keldari Minmatar Pirate Faction, or do I don't know, Pirate Faction battle cruisers, or I don't know, something, or maybe even something more new that's like, just every empire gets one, just so that the everyman can fly it instead of like only some, T5 Abyss runner using a Stormbringer or whatever.
What we also, what I actually skipped was the Edencom ships. So you guys buffed them again before anyone actually started to use them, to be quite honest, right? Which yes,
that's the oversimplified idea, but yeah.
Yeah, I know. Obviously, there's some people out there using them.
Yeah.
But so I think they were already in a decent place, just stats wise and stuff. But it's like obviously,
I mean,
the price tag, right?
Oh, yeah, I know. We've been saying since I basically have major regrets and lessons learned about distribution. I think the original distribution for them was just, and still the distribution is pretty brutal. The crazy amount of skills you need, the price of those skills, the material costs, like it was all pretty prohibitive, and that's too bad. But we've been saying also for like more than a year now, like, oh yeah, they're good enough, but they're just too hard to get. And I'm kind of sick of saying that now too. I want them to be good enough that they're worth getting, even though they're really hard to get, and then balance from there, like actually get some in space and then work from that point. Because, and I don't think that we've been through quite a bit of changes on the distribution stuff now too. Like the LP offers were reworked recently, and basically I don't think the pricing stuff or the skill plan is changing much. Like we've talked with the economy guys about that, gotten it to the best place we can, and I don't think it's going to change much. So I'm like, just now let's push them to be good enough to be worth this. Basically, if they need to be super high end because they cost a ton and be pretty strong, so be it.
All right.
I also, I mean, we'll see how this change goes, but I think, trying to do something like people have asked for since the beginning, adding some utility style bonuses like the trig stuff has, like shield rep stuff, or just more utility highs in general, even though I don't think for a lot of fleet uses that'd be very important. I think that totally is fine. And if just this chain thing is never, it seems crazy to me that it wouldn't be strong. But if it just, no matter what we do, it doesn't get used, we can look at the mechanic and see if we can do something totally different with it. The ships look so sick, it'd be a real tragedy if we never managed to figure out a way for them to...
I think people will use them. So I'm going to predict right now. I mean, obviously, there's already some alliances that work towards it. I think Horde is probably the biggest alliance. I think Test have also pushed for it a little bit. And you saw 2 fleets at least, right? The problem is also, like, everyone knows they are hard to get, so if they show up on a chaotic battlefield, they might just be primary, right? And they don't have an ADC, so that's why people are probably a little bit more careful when to use them. Even though they would know they're strong in this situation, they would probably still be careful with it. But I'm gonna predict that you'll see them like very soon, especially now with that buff, like to jump to 10 targets instead of 5. There's certain,
I don't know how this buff will go, but I'm super happy about this buff because I feel like what people have asked for since the beginning is tried to push them more towards being like other ships, like make their hit on the first target good enough that it's just like an eagle, except it also has some bonus damage. And that seems really boring to me. I really want to push. Yeah, I really want to push it into the AE mechanic just so that it's separate. And this makes it so that, like, one of the most common complaints is, or another solution and complaint is that since you can't pick the targets, you waste a ton of damage on drones, or other whatever, things you don't want to be shooting. And so what people always ask for is like more control over what you're shooting. And I like this much better. Like, you just hit more stuff. So it doesn't matter that you hit some drones because you also hit 5 ships anyway.
Yeah, and so Chiromancer says hacks are better than Edencom ships big time. That's oversimplified, because if you say 10 versus 10, yeah, 100%, those hacks will murder those Edencom ships. Whenever you talk about like 200 versus 200, I think then each shot has the potential to almost alpha even a hack. So then you run into like a real problem, because not like 9 other guys. Is it 1 plus 10 or is it 10 total? It's plus 10,
I think it's
right?
10 total. Actually, I don't remember. No, it's 10 total. It's 10 total.
All right, so it's like 9 other guys take damage too, and over time that will accumulate, and then people will ADC, which is a problem for hacks if they ADC too early, and then that problem snowballs quickly. I think.
I mean, I'm not sure, but I feel like if you could put a Stormbringer on field, like if it had no additional skill requirements, like just had like a faction, like it just needed Keldari and Galente Cruiser 5 or something, no additional skill requirements, and then the ships were like 300 mil each or 250 mil
You would
each total,
see these all day.
I think, yeah, you would see them all day already.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that's why I've been reluctant to turn up the power a lot, because on paper they're already good enough, but at the price they need to obviously,
I think
they need to justify costing a lot. So
yeah,
we'll see.
Gotta be careful, right? Sometimes the statistics say like, oh, these are complete shit, but they're not, right? They're really not.
Yeah.
So like one little change can just change everything. Like if, for example, the economic team says like, hey, let's, we can make them super cheap, and then they are 300 mil, everyone would just fly them, right?
Yep. I mean, now
governments would be mad because he paid good money for the ones he has already.
I mean, we're not gonna. I think now the price is probably not changing much.
Yeah, I don't even know what the price is actually for cruisers. For the cruiser, it's probably around the 600, 700 mil mark, right? Something around that. And for the frigates, like maybe 200, 250. Honestly, I don't even know. That's been a
I mean, and then that's not even, that's not even with all the like the specialization books and stuff are really expensive. Yeah, the cruiser's 450 for the ship, and then
the gun is probably
the ammo prices were the ones that were like crazy after show, but like the gun is 150, so you're paying 600 just for the fit at least without ammo.
So 650 is like a realistic thing, maybe total package. Which is, it's probably getting there. I don't know if it's getting cheaper or whatever, but it's probably like getting into the area where I would say like, yeah, if you can field a bunch of them, right? Like a really big
the damage mods are almost 100 mil each too. So probably more like pushing 800 per ship.
But 800 is like, that's a little bit too much, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, I'm gonna guess we'll see them more and more, and then maybe there's gonna be that one magical fleet that gets wiped out by them, and everyone's gonna switch. Who knows?
Yeah.
We've seen that before. That the meta, that's also another thing that, like, I think a lot of people that are not theory crafters, they don't realize sometimes the meta takes a long time to change. Like, so for example, I always talk about like Stukas, right? When we first started flying a lot of like MGD stuff, we started flying MGD stuff really early on, like on day one, really. But we had to figure it out for a long time before it really became effective, and like people said, like, okay, now it's OP. It took us like, I don't know, a year to get there at least, if not two. And I think that can be the same for a lot of stuff. People have always to be aware of that.
Takes a lot of time for people to, especially with something like this, with it's a huge skill requirement, it takes a lot of time to get just the option to run it, and then you have to prove that it's good, which might take the right situation or the right prep or whatever before people really start paying attention.
And then in this case, like I said earlier, like if you show up with a fleet like that, you might just get primaried. And then on paper, it looks like a disaster because you lost everything, right? Yeah, you might have killed some stuff, but like for that price tag, you certainly are primary problem. Yeah. So,
but as much as I like that excuse, having a ship in the game or a line of ships, in the game for whatever it's been now, year and a half, a year maybe, without it being adopted in like serious terms anywhere is not good.
Yeah, I mean, it's a straightforward new ship, right? While the Command Destroyer thing, I think that was like a ship that it wasn't supposed to be in that role, if you know what I mean. Like, it wasn't supposed to do exactly that. There was other roles that was already adopted for, right? So it's not like, it was completely unused.
I mean, a lot of the lesson for me for Command Destroyers and Trig stuff versus Edencom is, and it's tricky, but like the more general or the more like versatile something is we introduce, the more likely it is to get adopted, which seems obvious, but I think sometimes it's tempting to say, if we make something where we have a really clear purpose in mind, like we know exactly what this is meant to be for, that adoption will be good. But that's pretty like high risk because it makes the adoption like really on off. Like if it doesn't succeed at that one thing that you meant it for, then it's not going to be anywhere. Whereas with Trig stuff, we said, well, maybe this will be good in wormholes. Maybe this will be good in small scale stuff, faction warfare, other small scale roaming. Maybe it'll be good in, for ganking caps, whatever. But there's all these potential applications, and that gives you much likelier chance that at least some of them end up coming true. Whereas, like, if Edencom stuff isn't good in large fleet engagements, I mean, we have two basically hopes for it: large fleet engagements and PVE, and certain kinds of PVE. Basically, if it doesn't succeed in one of those, it's done. And and I think that's big argument for making stuff that's at least viable solo or small scale in some way, because there's so many different options there, whereas fleet is a little more restricted. Which kind of goes back to what I was saying about new ships too. Like I'd love to make some more general new ships, and I think we've avoided that because the super general, like Tech 1 ship, between cruisers and battleships is so saturated with stuff that it's hard to put new super general ships in there. But I think we could find enough difference to do it, and then have something that's more like Trig, where there's all kinds of places to use it, which is more fun than something like an Angel Titan, which has just like really narrow
but
appeal.
One thing I always talk about when it comes to like Titans and all that stuff, and probably people are getting sick of me saying it, but they shouldn't just be like bigger ships, more EHP, more DPS, more whatever, right? They should like have special roles and all that stuff, and I think that's like, that's probably the direction they should go towards. Like, I don't know, you could do something with wormholes with them, that they can keep open wormholes, or like they could do like disrupt gates, who knows, right? Like you could do all kinds of weird shit with them. And I bet, like, if you would like just say like, hey, anyone got any ideas, and you put that on Reddit, you're gonna get some fucking crazy ideas. So I think it's not gonna, you're not gonna run out of ideas for that kind of stuff. So
sounds like a great way to do.
I'm sure I don't suggest doing it.
For us to be like, hey Reddit, have any ideas?
Oh yeah. I mean, technically, the idea behind Reddit is like the most upvoted stuff should be the good stuff, right? So you don't have to read every comment, right? That's how I approach Reddit anyway, and I think everyone should. Like, if the title is interesting, click on it, read the first comment, maybe the second one. Don't go any deeper, right? Stay away from it, right? That's but
it's true, except for when people are really mad, then you can read to the bottom to find positive people, which I end up doing.
Yeah, you do that sometimes. You're like, oh, there must be one.
When everyone hates your change, if you go all the way to the bottom, you can find people who like it.
You're digging for that one guy.
Yeah.
And then, like a hero, he's like, hey, I kind of like
that
this
guy.
Yeah. Alrighty. Hey, we did an hour and a half, and I think we went through most of the stuff. I did kind of want to bring up Zkill and the Discord stuff, but like, I think we're gonna have you on again, since that's a general thing.
Next time when you're happier, so we don't have to get so heated, But it's always a pleasure, regardless.
I'm not too mad. I mean, I'm a little disappointed, but it's okay. I know
He'll fix it.
So I know it's coming from a good place, right?
It is.
I know you try
at least
to do your best.
We want the game to be fun and active and exciting for hunters and exciting for farmers, and just doing our best. And we'll keep tweaking stuff, especially the this. I didn't want to like drop all of it, but we're basically realized we have some pretty good opportunity to do follow-up stuff from these last 3 patches really quickly. So we'll do sometime in the next month probably a patch that just like stuff like the cloak duration like picks up a bunch of those things from the nullification update, the Black Ops update, and the observatory update, and just does like a first set of tweaks on all that stuff. So that should be coming like in the next couple weeks, hopefully.
Alrighty then. I'm glad I know there's someone doing stuff who actually gives a shit about the game. So thank you for that. And
everybody gives a shit. All the
I know.
All the folks I work with care very, very much. But
and I'm glad to hear that. I'm really. And Sigler's in chat. Sigler's another good one that I know for sure. He's doing his best. Even if we get mad sometimes, you guys just like, I think you guys know, like, it also comes from a good place. So
yes, of course.
Thanks for coming.
Wouldn't be here if that was the case. But.
All right.
Yeah, it's good to chat, and reach out after that follow-up patch and keep talking.
Alrighty. And the guys on stream, thanks again for hanging out, and see you guys on the next one, I'd say. Bye bye.